The U.S. Supreme Court today heard arguments in a case that could change standards of medical care and strike down bans on so-called conversion therapy for children. Conversion therapy broadly refers to attempts to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity and is banned in 23 states and the District of Columbia. A Colorado therapist, Kaylee Childs, says the ban limits her ability to work with adolescent patients and limits her freedom of speech.
Struggling kids benefit from access to voluntary counseling conversations that help them as they seek wholeness and gaining peace with their bodies. They deserve better than Colorado's one-size-fits-all approach.
But the state of Colorado argues the practice is dangerous and not medically sound.
This type of pressure, coercion, has been disavowed, discredited by all medical associations.
NewsHour Supreme Court analyst and SCOTUS blog co-founder Amy Howe was in the room for arguments in this case, and she joins us now. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So what is the question before the court here, and what is Childs arguing? We profiled her on the program last night.
So the question before the court is whether or not Colorado's ban on conversion therapy violates Childs' right to freedom of speech. And the state says it's just regulating treatment by healthcare professionals, that this is conduct rather than speech, so the First Amendment doesn't even kick in. But Childs says, look, all I do literally is talk therapy, and you are telling me that I can't engage in this speech that I want to engage in when I could engage in the opposite kind of speech, encouraging someone to affirm his or her gender identity. And that is discrimination based on the kinds of messages that I'm espousing.
And that's why she's invoking the right to free speech.
Exactly.
The state argues that this ban is in place to protect patients, and medical professionals don't have the right to give wrong or harmful advice to patients. What did the justices make of that argument?
The justices, some of the justices, particularly some of the court's conservative justices, were skeptical. The state's argument is that there is a medical consensus, including by major medical associations like the American Pediatric Association, that conversion therapy doesn't work and is in fact harmful. But some of the justices were skeptical about this idea of a medical consensus. So Justice Clarence Thomas, back in June, in a case called United States versus Scrometti, in which the Supreme Court upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care, wrote a concurring opinion in which he suggested that the challengers and the Biden administration in that case had given too much weight to claims of medical consensus and expertise. And so you had Justice Amy Barrett today asking the Solicitor General of Colorado, Shannon Stevenson, to point her to the studies that most support Colorado's assertion of risk of harm. But then this questioning of medical consensus was most strongly questioned by Justice Samuel Alito.
Was there a time when many medical professionals thought that certain people should not be permitted to procreate because they had low IQs? Was there a time when there were many medical professionals who thought that every child born with Down syndrome should be immediately put in an institution?
And there was Justice Jackson, who wondered how much freedom counselors should have to express support for practices like conversion therapy under the First Amendment.
I understand if Ms. Childs here were writing an article about conversion therapy or writing or giving a speech about it. But it's just a little puzzling to me that she would stand in a different position than a medical professional who has exactly the same goals, exactly the same interests, and would just be prescribing medication for that rather than her talking with the client.
So based on all of this, is there any indication on how the court will rule on this case?
It's always, a little bit hazardous to make predictions based on the oral argument. But the justices, there seemed like there was a majority of justices who were skeptical of this Colorado ban. I think the only real question after the oral argument is whether the justices will say outright that Colorado's ban violates the Constitution, or whether they'll send the case back to the lower courts for them to apply a more searching review.
And if they do overturn it, what's the broader impact?
Well, so there are more than 20 states that have similar laws. And so those states those states' bans on conversion therapy will also be much harder to defend.
Amy Howe, thanks as always for walking us through this case and the ones to come of this term.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.